and welcome to the program. This is Alexander Kerry. You're watching Head to Head on UATV. For years, medicine procurement in Ukraine had suffered from unclear policy rules causing budget losses and drastically affecting people's life. Now, together with United Nations Development Programme, the Ukrainian government has started reforms in state medicine procurement sector, showing a good example of overcoming corruption and helping thousands of Ukrainians. We're discussing now the progress of anti-corruption and medicine procurement reforms with UNDP Country Director in Ukraine, Janthomas Hiemstra. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
So first question would be, what are the changes in the process of medical procurements since the past 2 years?
Well, since the last 3 years, the budgets or large part of the budget of the government of Ukraine are actually transferred to 3 international organizations that are now doing the procurement with their rules and regulations on behalf of the government and the people of Ukraine. And ever since, quite a number of medicines that were not even in the market for years have entered the market again for those people suffering from those diseases. And prices have fallen dramatically, as the State Audit Bureau has indicated, up to 40% less for the medicines that we're buying now. I believe it's a great success. I mean, the government thinks so. It's now for the 3rd year that this is happening. And until such time that the government of Ukraine has reinstituted an agency or an institute that can do this on the Ukrainian side again, I believe we're setting the tone for indeed an excellent anti-corruption initiative in Ukraine.
So who will benefit from these new medicine procurements, and whom will it help saving life, basically?
Well, the public medicines are bought for the country for poor people. It is when ordinary Ukrainians go to the hospital, find themselves with a disease diagnosed, but they don't have money to pay for it. Then it's when the government comes across and says, okay, here you have free medicine. So it is targeted at the most vulnerable parts of the Ukrainian society. And as such, it is also a social protection measure. Many people in Ukraine, the more richer people, are used to buy their own medicines. They go to private clinics, they serve themselves in some way, but there are, tons of Ukrainians who do not have the financial means to buy medicines themselves. So it is for those people, particularly for children. We are buying, for example, medicine for children with cancer, people with hemophilia, TB, hepatitis. The range of medicines is quite elaborate.
So you talked about TB, and there are epidemics in Ukraine, which are unfortunately, unfortunately not existing in other countries. How these new procurements help fighting these epidemics?
Well, in some areas, indeed, it is a shortage of medicine that has caused more suffering in Ukraine than necessary. There are, unfortunately, also areas where it's not a shortage of medicine, but it's probably a shortage of the system, a shortage of a long-term perspective. When you talk about measles, TB, HIV, those are diseases that do not come up in a month or in a year. They actually are lingering in society for a long time, and they pop up when they are allowed to. Vaccination campaigns, awareness of people, also particularly of the risks of sexual contact and unprotected sex and all those things. That's not something you teach to someone in a week or in a month. So it is the persistence of education and health campaigning, plus, of course, the availability of medicine and the availability of doctors that make the difference for every country and also for Ukraine.
So. Is UNDP assistance in medicine procurement can be a guarantee not only for corruption elimination, but also for the control and the quality of medicine itself? How does UNDP help in that case?
No, absolutely. The standards that we in the United Nations are using for procurement are globally accepted standards. I mentioned the World Health Organization. That's an organization, our fellow UN agency, that sets the standards across the world for every country, developed or less developed or more developed, and we are buying medicines that are of the highest quality and the highest standard. Also in Ukraine, I have to say that we are producing medicine of high standard and of the highest standards.
Can you explain that? Like how producing, like do you have?
No, not we. I mean, there is a good pharmaceutical sector in Ukraine that actually produces medicine to a very high standard. And what we're actually doing with that pharmaceutical sector is to say, why don't you aspire and work up yourself to become of the same standard than any other international organization. Get yourselves accredited with WHO, set the same standards, and do not only then supply to Ukraine, but maybe start exporting to other countries. That the medicine market globally is huge, and any producer of good quality medicines is not limited to the Ukrainian market only.
Now, besides medical procurement, what are other successes in fighting the corruption in partnership with the international organizations or United Nations Development Programme?
Well, corruption unfortunately remains one of the very, very sensitive and one of the very difficult areas in Ukraine. When you look at the list of accomplishments that the country has, certainly medicine procurement usually comes somewhere at the top. Another one that is mentioned, and that is definitely also a big step forward, was the asset declaration system, where our civil servants have to declare what they have in the house, how many cars, how many houses, what they possess, so that we can check, not we, I mean, again, Ukrainian institution can check whether that wealth was obtained in a legal way, or maybe that things happened in a less legal way. Such systems are instituted in many countries around the world. Ukraine's system is a very ambitious one, and at the moment that system is already full of declarations that now need to be checked to find if people indeed have their wealth in a corrupt way or in a non-corrupt type of way. It's quite a challenge for the country, but that declaration system in itself, to which UNDP actually had an important contribution by developing the software with the National Bureau for the Prevention of Corruption, that now has to be brought to real benefit by starting to verify all these applications and to see where the corrupt people would be and who is not corrupt and who is corrupt, and then use the proper authorities to prosecute them.
And that's actually the word of proper authorities. Do you think that e-declaration and only e-declaration can, the fact of having them on the internet and having them shown, can really stop this kind of corruption?
No, of course it is one element of a system that is not only identifying those people, but also validating the claims. I mean, many people are just rich, right? I mean, there's nobody who says anything about that, whether criminal acts have been conducted. And then, of course, there is a role for courts, judges, and as we know, also there Ukraine is struggling how to find a judicial system that will actually convict people who are guilty.
Now, on a practical level, and to conclude this interview, what is the next big challenge for UNDP now in Ukraine?
Well, the biggest challenge, the most long-term challenge that I see for Ukraine is how we can keep this country as beautiful and as clean and as green and as energy efficient as it can be for the future. We all know that Ukraine aspires to be a European country, which means you have to join a number of nations that are already fully powered by green energy. They don't burn coal anymore. Some of them don't even use gas anymore. Some of them have the soil cleaned up because there's no pollution left. The aspiration of Ukraine to be part of Europe will translate into a green Ukraine. A Ukraine also that starts to grow and have jobs in the green economy, solar panels, biomass, windmills, what do we have? And Ukraine has to make that transition in many years to come. That's not a short-term goal, that is something that needs to happen in decades, but that is, I believe, a challenge that Ukraine wants to put its teeth in now, because that access to Europe and that green and clean environmental Ukraine will one day be the winner, I believe, on bringing Ukraine, the big country that it is, properly into Europe.
Well, let's hope to that. Thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio. That was UNDP Country Director in Ukraine, Janthomas Hiemstra. Thank you for watching the program. Stay tuned for the rest.